Why are you less worried than some about semis?
Sure. I think that volatility is par for the course for the semiconductor sector. If I look at the last decade, we have had 10 to 12 10% plus corrections in the sector, but the SOX index has compounded 26% annually, which is 2 times what the S&P 500 has done. So it is a volatile sector. It does very well in Q1 and Q4. But as we get into Q2, that's when, just before earnings, there happens to be this bout of volatility. In fact, April, the month of April, has been down 8 out of the last 10 years. But you know what? The month of May has been up the last 9 out of the 10 years. So that's the seasonal. But more importantly, when you look at the growth leader in the space, which is NVIDIA, the addressable market for them is growing. Their execution is extremely strong right now. Their pipeline is extremely strong. And most importantly, the stock's valuation at about 25 times next year's numbers. That's exactly where the stock has troughed the last 3 times it went through this kind of volatility. So we think that volatility is part of the course for the sector, and the growth leader is doing extremely well right now.
And so you like NVIDIA, but what about other names in the semi area that you like as well, and some that you might avoid?
Sure. So I think the analysis really starts with where can we trust the spenders. So if I look across all the different end markets, the spenders that are really investing the most heavily are all in the data center, because they are in early phases of building out their large language models, of building out their cloud infrastructure. We think we are just in year 2 of what is probably at least a 3 to 4 year deployment cycle for them. So we like most of the names exposed to the data center. NVIDIA is our top pick, but also names such as Broadcom, such as Micron, Marvell, AMD. And I think a number of these names benefit because they are all exposed to different parts of that build out. Some are doing better on the computing side. Some are doing better on the memory side. Some are doing better on the networking side. But all 3 of those sides have to essentially come together to help the cloud customers build out this infrastructure.
Are there winners potentially in areas that are not so directly tied to data center? We hear a lot about the data centers, but obviously that's but one area of sales opportunity for semiconductor companies. Are there other areas, other companies that could see growth?
Yeah, Tyler, and you might have heard us talk about the 3 C's of semis: cloud, cars, complexity. These are the 3 places where we think there is enduring growth in the sector. So cloud computing, we just discussed. Mm-hmm. I think the next interesting area is just the rising complexity of chip making. So names such as KLA, Applied Materials, Cadence, Synopsys, I think these names are levered to the secular growth and complexity of designing these chips, or manufacturing these high-end systems. So complexity area we like. And then cars. I know that there's a lot of concern about just the pace of EV adoption, but if you look at an average car that sells globally, it is the cost is about $35,000, and the amount of semiconductors in it is only 2%, or only $700. But look at every feature the consumer cares about, whether it's electrification, safety, security, infotainment. So we think over long periods of time, as much as it is cyclical, we do think that automotive semiconductors and names such as NXP Semiconductor, I think are also positioned extremely well outside of the data center and cloud computing area.
Does weakness in the auto sector, for example, Tesla cutting the price, which is certainly a signal that they need to juice up their sales, does that worry you at all here?
Yeah, for sure. I do think that last year global auto production was up 9%. You know, we saw 30+% growth in EVs. This year auto production will probably be flat, and the growth in EVs is probably going to be more like 15-20%. Now, as much as Tesla may not grow this year, or the growth rate is being challenged, remember that growth rate of EVs outside the U.S. is doing quite well. In China, for example, is doing very well. And that's the important thing about the semiconductor industry, that these are companies that are exposed to the global market, not just the U.S. market. So for, let's say, a Tesla that may or may not be doing well, you have this secular adoption of semiconductors across hybrids, across traditional ICE cars, because every consumer cares about safety, security, infotainment. So it's not just EVs. I think outside of that, there is semi-adoption. And then look at customers outside of the U.S. as well. So it's a global industry. And then valuations also, I think, are a lot more reasonable. NXP trading at 16 times this year, 14 times next year, I think is extremely compellingly valued at this point.
Very interesting. Okay, Vivek, thank you so much. Vivek Arya, we appreciate your time.
Thank you, Tyler.
Thank you.